Oh shit! Hi, welcome to Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell, and today we are talking about the Terminator anime, Terminator Zero. In 1997 Tokyo, Malcolm Lee is developing Kokoro, an AI system intended to compete with Skynet. The day before Judgment Day, Lee finds himself and his 3 children pursued by an unknown robot assassin and a mysterious soldier from the year 2022. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Doug, why are you reviewing an anime? Why are you reviewing an anime? You're Film Stash. And I know what you're talking about, but sometimes, I see some things pop up on my radar and I want to check it out. Plus, like anyone else who likes the sci-fi genre, Terminator 1 and 2, they are amongst some of my favorite movies of all time. You can even see it, I have them right here on the shelf. I own all the Terminator movies, even the Suck Your Last 2, but I mean, whatever. I even watched the first 2 Terminator films while watching the show just to freshen up my Terminator lore. So I'm not too much into anime, to be honest with you guys. When I was a kid getting ready for school in the morning, I watched an episode here and there on TV because it was the first thing showing in the morning. But as soon as I saw a trailer for it, I knew, looking at it, I was like, oh my god, I love Terminator, and I like cartoons, and I like animation that leans more toward adults, so I decided to check it out. So the project itself, it was announced in 2021 to be released on Netflix. And it was developed by the showrunner Mattson Tomlin and the director Masashi Kode. Looking up information for this particular series, I did find that Mattson, he has stated that all 6 Terminator movies, they are considered canon to this show, which, I mean, it doesn't take much of a genius. If you take a glance at the Terminator movies as a whole, that is a very, very confusing statement. Because if you look at the Terminator films as a whole and you really break them down, there are roughly 4 timelines that you could go with this thing. There's the James Cameron timeline. That's Terminators 1, Terminator 2, and I mean, I guess if you're weird enough, you could even include the Terminator ride at Universal that was around for a while, because he directed that, and that was basically his vision. So that would be the first timeline. The second timeline is the Future War timeline. These are the movies that lead up to eventually the future war that is depicted throughout these movies. That would be Terminator 1, Terminator 2, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, and then it would go into Terminator Salvation. And by definition, even looking at these films, even though the story isn't complete, it does go enough into a perpetual time loop that you could even end it there. There's the Terminator Genisys timeline. That would be you starting off with the time travel of T1. Kyle Reese shows up into the past, the T-800 shows up into the past too, and then of course, diversions have happened way before the movie even started that creates a whole new rift, and it basically ignores the movies that everybody likes. And you get this weird and kind of confusing multiversal adventure. It's very sloppy. And then you have the Terminator Dark Fate timeline. That is Terminator 1, Terminator 2, and then the film Terminator Dark Fate, that essentially it goes right off of Terminator 2, and it kills John Connor off at the very beginning of the movie, and then you pretty much follow new protagonists for the rest of the movie, and Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger, they team up somewhere in between there. It is truly the most controversial timeline. So, in an interview with the Discussing Film website, Tomlin, he has stated that his favorite film of all 6 movies, he does like all 6 movies, his favorite is the original Terminator, because if you look at it, it is the most gritty of the films, and there's a lot more of a horror aspect into it, and there's just something creepy that the low budget brings into the overall story, besides a startling idea. He also stated he also likes Terminator Salvation, and really the only reason he likes Terminator Salvation is because the world and the physics of that world seem to be a bit more fully realized in terms of the machines and how they have like a certain weight to them. Out of the timelines I listed, I do like the future war timeline. I do think of the films, I think the first two, they are as perfect as you can get, even the flaws. I don't hate T3 like so many other fans do, and I even like Salvation. Like, flaws and all, it's nice to finally get a story that isn't just the time travel cat and mouse chase that many of these films post T2 just kind of devolve into without really trying anything new.
I hope you're enjoying this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Any support will be greatly appreciated. And now, back to the stash.
So to kick off my positives, looking at the overall picture of this particular anime, Tomlin's Terminator inspirations, they are apparent from the tone to the overall execution. Throughout it, there's this sense of dread, there's this horror, there's a bit of paranoia because you see these machines that are basically the equivalent of AI and the robots that we have now working our stores and working some of our jobs throughout. You get that, and then you also get Terminator itself and how ruthless it is. It does remind me a good chunk of Arnie's performance from that original film, albeit adjusted for a culture within Tokyo. The opening scene where Aiko, she faces off against a Terminator to get key information, it establishes the style that the series would have moving forward. While it's not as abundant as it was, it shows that this anime movements are kinetic, it's violent, it's bloody. It does connect to the series in that way, although a bit more scaled up to 10. And it truly shows the threat that is presented and how ruthless these robots can be. She almost dies so many times, but it shows what the threat is, and I think that's truly needed. If we look at the animation style as a whole, it has a very fluid motion of people in their day-to-day lives, and I think it truly works, I think, in keeping the series pretty grounded. But what makes it work also is with the Terminator. His movements, they aren't as fluid as our main characters and as the human supporting characters. Movements are a lot more rigid and fast and slow at the same time. It's very much inconsistent, but in a way that truly works and make this Terminator feel otherworldly. Even within the animation style, like, everybody has anime eyes, not like the overly done cartoonish anime eyes. They have the eyes that you would see within the anime style. And then with this Terminator, to show that it is different, its eyes are very different from everybody else. It's like this Terminator is staring into your soul. Its eyes are wide open, and it has like a tiny dot, as if it's like in a perpetual state of focus. And it's very unsettling, and I do dig that style. I do think that this particular entry, having it take place in Tokyo back in 1997, I do think that was an interesting choice. It was done because pretty much the team behind this installment, they wanted it to take place more in Tokyo to connect with that anime space. Whether it was done for commercial reasons or for artistic reasons, I do think it helps this entry stand out. One, if you want to connect it to the other movies, I think it shows the conflict of the future war as a wide-scale event rather than just, oh, it takes place in LA. Even within that, I think it helps this particular entry stand out on its own. Because while there are subtle mentions of Skynet and Los Angeles for around the time, I think, place within, I think, Terminator 2, it takes like concurrent with that. It happens roughly at the same time, but it's different enough and it doesn't completely follow the film's continuity, so it is able to stand out on its own and be its own adventure without having to rely on the other movies. Yet there's homages to it and it feels different, which is great. And the dynamics of the character being in Tokyo, I think it also stands out within the Terminator franchise because with it taking place in America, the weapons are so easy to get. For the Terminator, for Linda Hamilton, whenever she does become badass in part 2, and it's weapons and guns and knives everywhere. But here, for an average citizen in Tokyo, it's harder to get any type of weapon. It's hard to get guns. So they had to get a bit more creative with that. And it was a restriction that I do think helps with the tension. And you even see with the Terminator, he isn't able to get guns, so he basically makes a crossbow within his forearm and he's able to just shoot it off, and that's his work around the guns situation. Going back to the animation, I feel that the animation overall, the modern use of anime done on a computer, along with CG elements, it is so gorgeous to look at. Every frame is gorgeous. Like, I could take a screenshot of most of the show and I could put it on my background on my phone. I could put it on my Roku TV here. It is really pretty to look at. If you were to watch any of the scenes with the Kokoro AI, like, that backs up my point alone. Now, without any spoilers, I do think that the characters of Malcolm Lee, Misaki, and the AI system Kokoro, they are the most interesting characters and elements of the show. Malcolm's race against time to form this AI that could compete with Skynet, it led to truly several riveting scenes where you actually have a discussion on the merits of humanity. It does lead to some interesting philosophical discussions that, while you get basic discussions like that with James Cameron's Terminator movies, I feel that this expands it so much more. And it's not just limited to the AI discussions too. Like, there's even writing with time travel was actually really interesting too. That was probably to justify all the sequels and the different directions they went, which I guess, fair enough. I did think it was an interesting way to make this series stand apart, but also encompass the franchise as a whole and embrace all the elements of it. So I can't speak Japanese, but in reading the subtitles and listening to the performances, I feel that these performances, they broke through the language barrier that might be present maybe with me as someone who doesn't really watch animes all that much. The voiceover work, it was pretty good. And the subtleties in the performance, it generally was felt from most of the cast other than the youngest daughter. Yeah, that daughter, sometimes she could get a little annoying. Oh! Do you know what that means? That means it's time for intermission. And today's popcorn that we're going to be trying, green tea and strawberry popcorn. Let's open it up. You look over here. Let's just get right down the hatch then. Let's try it. This one's interesting because first, it tastes weirdly enough like a strawberry Pop-Tart. As I'm chewing on it more, that green tea flavor just kind of kicks in. And it doesn't taste terrible, but it drowns out the strawberry taste. And it's not something I would go back to with popcorn. I don't know. I mean, it's fine. It's not my favorite, but I'd give that a 5 out of 10. So going into the mixed, despite just how freaky this Terminator is, I feel like it is hard. I feel like it's at a slight disadvantage still compared to the live action portrayals of Arnold Schwarzenegger with Robert Patrick. They do have a charisma within their portrayals of live action. And while the anime, it's really cool to see some of the violence and just how ruthless it can be. It's a thing that does get lost, unfortunately, in switching to an animated medium. Still great, but it is off within that regard. Even continuing into that Terminator, the gimmick of the crossbow within the arm, like at first I thought it was cool, it was different, it set this Terminator apart. But over time, it just didn't add up, unfortunately, to something truly, truly cool. This one just felt like such a step back. For this type of Terminator story, I feel that there may have been one too many characters within this whole adventure. Now, anything with Malcolm, of course, and the 3 AIs of Kokora, that was great. You keep that in. You keep the story of the Terminator pursuing everybody and Masaki. That I will completely leave spoiler free. You have to experience that yourself. That story takes an interesting twist. And then you have Aiko, the soldier from the future. You keep hers in too. All those stories were interesting, but they kept cutting back to the children, and that's where it's mixed to me. I understand having an entire family at the center of this drama, but whenever, for a good chunk of the series, at least like maybe 2 to 3 episodes, it felt like these kids kept trying to run away to this amusement park, and they eventually collided with the main story and the subplots within that, but stretches the plot just a little too thin just to fill the 8-episode order that Netflix put out. And I'm not saying get rid of the kids entirely, but I think that you had 3 kids in there. 2 of them actually served a purpose. The middle child, he's just kind of there. He doesn't really contribute too much. Truthfully, I think you keep the older child and you keep the younger child, because they both have things that they contribute to the story, and they probably could have combined his traits with the youngest child. Maybe get a different voice actor for that kid. Like, she was getting on my nerves, that youngest kid. I think you would have had a much better, tighter story. Now, going into the negatives here. I feel like, and these are just little nitpicks, I do think the series was solid as a whole, but towards the end, there were just a few too many twists that were just kind of thrown in. Some of the twists that they revealed later on in the show, I thought were quite interesting. It redefined the entire context of the characters. But then new twists just kept getting added and added as the show's wrapping up. I felt like that one scene from one of the Austin Powers here.
But if I'm still frozen in 1967, how could I have been unthawed in the 90s and traveled back to, oh no, I've gone cross-eyed?
Like, I understand the twists. Whenever my girlfriend was asking me about the show, like, I understood what happened, but it was hard to explain, and I think it just kind of showed just how sloppy the writing towards the end kind of got. And while we are discussing the ending itself, I just feel like this is a problem with this anime, but it's also a problem with other Netflix shows. But the ending itself did not feel complete. It did not feel like a complete story. We don't even know if another season has been greenlit or not. They ended in a way that would only work if they got another season. If they don't end up getting another season, it's left to just continue on this thing that will never come, and it kind of ends the show on kind of an note. This whole series, as much as I liked many things about it, it generally felt a little too stretched out. If you got the same material and you just like tightened some of the plot points and the subplots, you would have had a pretty complete and full movie. Whether it would have been as positively received, it's hard to say, because it does follow a lot of the same elements of Terminator, but I do think you would have gotten a much more satisfying product. In the end, I enjoyed the show quite a lot, but I don't know if I would ever return to watch it on its own. Despite those few nitpicks, I genuinely would recommend the series if you are into Terminator. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10. So for this week, I'm actually turning the question back onto you guys. I'm not into anime as much, but I'd be down to check out some animes. So let me know below in the comments what anime you would recommend to me to watch as someone who's just kind of starting out. I generally like sci-fi, I do like comedy. I like things in general as long as they could get me hooked immediately. So yeah, just let me know what you would recommend to someone who's just starting out with this, and I might check it out. We'll see. Well, that's all the time we have for today here at Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell, and if you excuse me, I'll be back. Hey, Editing Doug here. I just wanted to let you guys know before we head out, I did check my subscribers and I saw that I have 100 people following me now. So thank you guys so much for subscribing and checking out my channel. I really appreciate it. So I want to do something special. So this upcoming week, I'm going to have a special subscriber review. Comment below what you'd like me to see, and if there's a title that keeps popping up the most, that's going to be the movie I review next week. Thank you guys so much.